Local stories, local people. We're taking you inside Western Mass news. It's the Even Better Western Mass podcast with Dave Madsen.
Welcome to this week's edition of the Even Better Western Mass podcast. Well, here we are, 2/3 of the way through the month of September. Sure feeling like fall, too. Wherever you are, hope you're doing well. This week, we're going to focus on Square One. Square One is a private nonprofit organization based in Springfield that provides early education and care for children, as well as support services for families. Square One was founded as the Springfield Day Nursery in 1883 by Harriet Merriam. She's the daughter of Charles Merriam, yes, of Merriam-Webster dictionaries. It was in response to a critical and unmet community need for childcare among Springfield's working families. Well, 137 years later, that need is greater than ever, even more so in the COVID-19 era. My guest is Kristine Allard. She's Square One's Vice President of Development and Communications. We talk about that need and the strain that it's put on Square One. Kristine, thank you for being with us on the Even Better Western Mass podcast. A lot going on. I know this has been a very busy time for you. For those folks who don't know of Square One, tell us a little bit about it and a little bit of background.
Sure. Well, first off, thank you for having us on the show and giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about the work that we're doing and some exciting stuff that we have coming down the pipeline. Square One is actually one of the oldest nonprofits in Western Massachusetts. We've been around since 1883, believe it or not, and we provide early learning and family support services. So we provide childcare and early learning to about 500 children every day, including infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and school-age children. And then on the other side of the organization is our family support services, where we serve about 1,500 families every year. Everything from folks just needing a little extra support with diapers and baby wipes and formula, things like that, to home visiting, to programs for incarcerated parents and post-incarcerated parents, or parents struggling with addiction recovery. We have everything from play groups and any kind of support you could possibly imagine for families that just need a little bit of support as they're trying to raise their children. Everything that we do, actually more accurately, all of our success is measured upon how well the children are doing. But we know that when families are coming from situations where they're struggling a little bit, whether it be through poverty or food insecurity, things like that, we know that we can't expect the children to be successful if we're not supporting mom and dad and trying to help them overcome some of the challenges that they might be facing from time to time.
My guess is in this COVID-19 era, more and more families fall under your guise and are looking and need help now.
Absolutely. I mean, the percentage of families that reached out to us for support for things like diapers, it was an increase of something like 400% throughout the state of Massachusetts, where families were looking for diaper donations. We're so fortunate. We have such great partners in this region that have helped us and supplied us with things like diapers and, essential supplies for families that, we were prepared for it. If we didn't have all the things that we needed right out of the gate, we knew who to ask. The various foundations in our region and the corporations that have been long-term partners to us, we're very fortunate to have the support of this great community that we live in here.
Now, many parents now, with what's going on with more home learning, more remote learning and things like that, parents are in a tough spot right now who need to go to work, to be able to put food on the table and pay the rent. Just the stress this time is putting on families.
It's pretty incredible. I mean, I think parents under normal circumstances are forced to make some tough decisions, right? How do they get to work, and do they have proper care at home, and who's going to care for their children while they can't be there? And those are under normal circumstances. Now enter the COVID crisis, and parents who don't have the luxury of working from home or do not have the kinds of jobs where that's even a possibility what do they do? And especially now where, you know, folks may have gotten through the summer or made their plans to carry them through the summer and figured it out thinking, okay, once the kids go back to school, I'll be all set. Well, here in Springfield, the children are going to school 100% remote for the first quarter of the school year. So we really had to get creative and work with the state and say, okay, how do we support those families who don't have the option of staying home with their kids? You know, you're talking about like kindergarten through grade 5. They're certainly not old enough to be home alone. May not have resources or the ability to get creative with that. So we are really fortunate that we were able to extend our licensing with the state and be able to provide for families who need full-time care during the day. So we have upped our technology and trained our staff now on how can we maintain the social distancing protocols and yet still have these families be able to send their children to us so that we can support them during the remote learning while these families have to go off to work. So we're excited to be able to support families in that role, and we've been doing everything we can to prepare for that. I'm also excited. We opened our preschool centers back in June. And at that time, we were licensed to have 50% capacity for serving about 50% of the families that normally rely on us. And the transition has gone so well that we've now been approved to bring back the other 50% and be able to get up to capacity in our preschool centers as well. So things are moving in the right direction. We put a lot of safety measures in place. And, you know, of course, none of this comes without a cost, right? And our fundraising is more critical than ever before. You know, as I mentioned before, we have fantastic partners in the community that support us under normal circumstances and help us keep our programs going on a regular basis. But now, you know, enter the COVID crisis. And so we have to do all those things we were doing before, plus all of these other things. And, you know, everything from our expenses for cleaning or technology, making sure that the kids have the, you know, computers and tablets and all the things they need to be successful in their remote learning. You know, everything comes with a price. So
definitely nothing anybody saw at the beginning of this year, the strain that this is putting on your budget, and also the impact on your sponsors and your donors through the years that, you know, they're all struggling too. Not all of them, but many of them are.
Exactly. And what we found too is a lot of folks who, you know, understandably with a little bit of, you know, small bucket of money where they give to the community. Well, when the COVID crisis first came into the picture, they took all that money and they gave it to well-deserving organizations, food banks and frontline workers and folks who really needed the extra money. But now what we're running into is some organizations who would have normally sponsored one of our events, for example, or been able to adopt a classroom, have said, we're going to have to take a break because we exhausted all of those community funds to help, you know, direct responders in the COVID crisis. Again, totally understand that those organizations were doing amazing work in serving the community, but at the same time now we're like, okay, we've got to get really creative here and be able to cast the donor net a little wider now and reach a new pool of donors and make folks aware of what we are doing, both in response to the COVID crisis, but on a regular basis, so folks understand our history and you know, the impact of the work that we're doing.
The other part of this too is really the unknown. I mean, it's one thing to know, okay, this is going to end at the end of September, but with COVID-19, this could go on, well, for goodness knows how many months, and that impact because you know, so that's going to impact those businesses. So that rolls us into the new campaign that you folks started there, the Campaign for Healthy Kids. Tell me about that.
Oh gosh, Dave, I am so excited about this campaign. We had talked about doing this a long time ago. I mean, this is years in the making. We started to talk about ways to get creative with our fundraising. And again, we're always looking for ways to raise awareness of what we're doing and to broaden our scope, our donor base. And so when we sat down, gosh, like I said, it was probably 2 years ago at this point, to talk about, okay, what do we want to do here and how do we want to shape this campaign? campaign and what do we want to be the foundation of it? Well, it came down to, when we kind of picked apart everything we do, it really all comes down to building a healthy foundation for our kids. And we know that what we're doing right now is supporting children at the most critical time in their lives to build the leaders of tomorrow. But everything we do is based on good health, whether it's developing a healthy learning environment for the children, providing healthy meals, physical fitness, and very critically important, their social emotional health. We have a team of therapists and social workers, case managers on our staff who respond to those very important social emotional pieces that come with some of the challenges that our kids are facing. A number of our children are in foster care, or they have cases in DCF, and that's some, not all, but we know we need to respond to those needs in order to give them that healthy foundation that they need to be successful in school and in their careers as they grow up into adulthood. So we created this campaign based on that. It's the Campaign for Healthy Kids, where all of our fundraising efforts are going to be kind of under this umbrella of the campaign. At the time, we had no idea that COVID was going to strike the way it did, and but I think now our response to the COVID crisis connects well and aligns with everything we're doing. We've realized that in order to have the children come back to us and be in care with us, in order for us to continue to provide services for their families, we have to practice all those safety protocols. So our teachers have had to redo their curriculums. We have had to reconfigure all of our classroom spaces. Our family child care providers have had to rearrange those are our home-based child care providers. They've had to rearrange everything there, and all of that comes with the need for resources. So we've responded to all of that, but it doesn't come without a cost. But again, this campaign, the alignment of it the timing of it is very good for us to speak to the need to constantly be able to respond to things as they change in our community.
You look at the uncertainty for many children in an inner city, and now throw COVID-19 into the mix. I mean, that's just one more element. And the one thing I've often thought about with children now, and I look at my grandchildren, is that the impact of COVID-19 on them. It's like, okay, we're not in school, we're not doing this, we're not doing that. That's just one more thing, especially inner city children don't need in their lives.
That's absolutely right. So for a lot of our kids, their home situations are traumatic for them. And when someone's in an unhealthy home situation, the worst thing you can do is put them in isolation. We learned that the cases of child abuse here in Massachusetts reported cases went down 53% while we were in lockdown. And that is not because 53% of the children were no longer being abused. It was because there was nobody witnessing them. They're bus drivers, they're teachers, the cafeteria workers that see them at lunchtime, and no one was seeing them to report those suspected cases of abuse. So we knew that in reopening our centers, we had to be prepared for some traumatic situations. And there have been some where we've really had to engage with our therapists, and the staff had to be prepared for all that. I think that our public schools and everyone in the community now, with school folks starting to transition back to school, everyone needs to be prepared for that. And it's a problem everywhere, but particularly in our urban communities.
Yeah, the long-term impact we look on our children. And, as you were mentioning, that the foundation of everything in our children's lives really start at an early age. And I think sometimes that's something we take for granted in families that are more stable, but in families that aren't as stable, it's just not there.
That's right. And families, when you're struggling and there are things happening in your life, you don't always respond the way you would with a clear head. So, sometimes, again, it speaks to why we need to really support their families during their times of stress, and, help them. We help align our families with good jobs and with training and to finish up their school. We have a program for families whose parents, they need to earn their high school equivalency, or we can help get them into a trade school or to college, whatever their path, whatever path they want to pursue. We provide that level of support for them to do that. And again, our goal is to always position these children for success. And that's really the underlying goal in everything we do.
Sure. All right. Let's get back to the campaign itself. The fact is as you were mentioning that with COVID-19, it's a campaign you really need now more than ever. And the fact that you need more support from the community, and we know it's tough, but you look at the services that you are providing to these families and these children, and they have to be there.
That's right. And so this campaign, it is one of those opportunities for folks to really engage in a special way. We put together an amazing team of folks from the community who have stepped up, and you'll see the public service announcement that we've done. There's this fabulous video where it shows children transitioning into their adult leadership role.
I could really use a vacation. I really hope the weather cooperates this weekend.
You have to pick up Joe from daycare. No, I won't be there by 5.
I know. I have a major housing event.
What time is that again?
I told her to come to me. We do much better work on SUVs.
Speaking of, do you actually do car wraps?
Gosh golly gee whiz, you two are always talking business and it is exhausting.
All right, everyone, let's focus. This is worse than dealing with toddlers.
Developing the next generation of leaders is no child's play. From nutritious meals and physical fitness to social, emotional well-being and a healthy learning environment, long-term success in life begins with a healthy foundation. Providing opportunities for children and families to be successful is what Square One is all about. Your support is critical to our success. And now, giving is as easy as ABC 123. Simply text ABC 123 to 44321 to make your contribution today. Every dollar counts. Square One. This is where it starts.
Well, the beauty of this campaign is that here in Western Massachusetts, folks are going to recognize some of the folks here, but it really works anywhere. So it's local enough here, so our local folks will recognize some of the folks that volunteer to help us on this, but it's not so local that it doesn't work in other parts of the country, and people will recognize what we're doing here and say, I want to support that important work. So I really urge everybody to take a look at that video, and you can get to everything right from our website, which is startatsquareone.org. And we're asking people to either visit the website to make a donation, or it has a text to give call to action on it. And we've kept it really simple. You text ABC 123 to 44321. And it brings you right up to a page where you can select what level of donation you'd like to support us at.
And we know that people in Western Mass have always been very generous with their money and with their time too, to be able to help out. But when you look at what's going on with COVID-19, and as I mentioned before, the fact that we don't know when this is going to end, so the continued strain it's going to be putting on your resources just by the fact that there are, you were talking about whether it's sanitizing or just doing different things for social distancing and stuff like that, all these added expenses that you didn't have that are going to be there for a while.
That's right. Absolutely. And we don't know when things are going to get better and if and when things will ever go back to that quote unquote normal that we refer to all the time. But for now, we have to be prepared for every possible scenario. And right now that means making sure that we have the resources in place to provide families with the peace of mind they need to be able to do their jobs, and that their children will be safe and as healthy as possible with us, and have trust in us that we have put all the safety mechanisms in place to be able to support them during this really critical time right now.
You have to wonder, I touched on it before, is what do your staff hear from these children in this day and age as far as the uncertainty? How do they express how they feel in this time?
Well, that's a great question. And the circumstances, for each of our families are different. But we have great communication. Our staff is highly trained, and our educators know that they can lean on our team of therapists and experts in that area, and our social workers when there's something that comes up that doesn't seem right to them. A child that normally is very talkative, for example, and comes in and all of a sudden they're very reserved and not talking, or, so they're trained to pick up on some of those cues and be able to respond in the appropriate way, whether that's by responding themselves or calling in someone with that level of expertise. We've had, children with various levels of trauma throughout the history of the organization, but now we know that with kids having been in isolation for some time, that we fully expect and are prepared for things to surface that they have seen or experienced at home. We've got some amazing families that are just working super hard to provide for their kids and build a good future. We also have some families with a level of struggle that most of us would, really hopefully never have to deal with. Again, there's some, households where we've discovered that there's been violence at home, or that, mom or dad might be incarcerated or post-incarcerated. So what does that look like when they come home, and how do we provide the support they need to be good parents? We know that a lot of our kids were hungry during the times of isolation. We know that our ability to provide breakfast, lunch, and snacks to these kids is really critical. And I know families struggled because we weren't able to do that for that during that shutdown period.
And for many of these kids too, I'm sure that's really the only stability they have, and really the only source of meals that they have.
That's very true. And we did our best, even when our centers were closed, to be able to provide groceries, gift cards, to help the families meet those basic needs, and to give them rides to places. That's another issue. Transportation is a huge issue for our families. So if families were not able to get to sources where there were free food available, we helped get it to them. So whether we provided delivered groceries to their homes, or helped align them with some transportation services to support them on that, it just never ends. There's as soon as you have the answer to one problem, there's another layer of complication. So we're always getting creative and finding ways to help meet some of those challenges.
And I was thinking too, as you were talking about that, the fact that I'm sure there are many folks who you are helping now who 6 months ago thought to themselves, well, I'd never, well, maybe subconsciously, I'd never need the help of an organization like Square One, but all of a sudden find themselves in a position that they do. And as you look for people to donate, maybe that's just a good position to put yourself in. It's like, I don't know if I'd ever have to be in this position, but I want to make sure you're there if I am.
Well, that's exactly right. And some folks too, for their employees. We've gotten some calls lately from some of the employers in the area to say, hey, I know you guys are always the ones to jump in when folks need, what are you doing to support families during remote learning? Because I've got a whole team of people that all have school-age children and they don't know what to do. So these businesses that we once relied on for financial support are now turning to us to say, how can you help us continue to run our business? Are you able to provide childcare for my employees who need help during this very unusual time? So we really pride ourselves on being a community partner. So it's not just always about asking for money. It's a lot of it can be two ways, and I think this current culture that we're living in right now speaks to that. So it may not be that somebody is necessarily struggling financially or having the kinds of struggles that many of our families have, but it may be that they just need to go to work and they now have children who are learning remotely and they don't have anybody to care for them during the day. So that's like our way of partnering with those businesses that have supported us for a long time. So, in a way, this really highlights the definition of partnership versus us just being on the receiving end of other people's help all the time.
Sure. I would guess too, at this point in time this obviously the state and federal government are under a strain. Their budgets are under a strain. I mean, do you worry about the long-term impact that could have on you?
Oh, for sure. Definitely. I think anybody who does the kind of work that I do and work in development, and you ask people for money all the time, the wells only run so deep, right? You look at organizations, this community is packed with organizations doing amazing work in all different capacities. You have nonprofits working with pets, and you have nonprofits working with children and elderly and all different types of challenges that people have. It's an amazing place to live and work in that sense, but we are all knocking on the same doors for funding. we know that from time to time you're going to hear no, not because people don't want to support you, but because there are a lot of organizations out here who need support from a limited donor pool. And that's tough sometimes, because even when we know we celebrate the gifts that we get, and we have to hear no from time to time, you also want to seem like you're supportive to the other organizations and their really important critical missions too. But again, I think that speaks to our campaign for Healthy Kids, where we're really trying to broaden our donor base. And in my world, when you ask folks for gifts, we love those big multi-$1,000 gifts that come to us, but those are hard to sustain. And I always tell people, when you're looking to fundraise, and wouldn't you rather have five $5,000 gifts than one $25,000 gift? Hands down. It's because if one of those $5,000 gifts has to go away for whatever reason, it's much easier to absorb that. But when that $25,000 donor has to put their donation on hold for any reason, that's a tough one to absorb, a tough loss to absorb. So, I think, again, this campaign really speaks to donors at all different levels. And so we can build up our donor base of those $25, $50 donations, and engage more folks in the work that we do. And then they'll tell more people, and they'll tell more people. And so it will, sort of grow organically, I think.
I think quite often in fundraising, we forget about that. It's like, let's look for those big money donations. But as you said, you lose a big money donor and you're losing a big chunk of what, the money coming into you. So it does make sense to go after those smaller donations. And the fact is no amount is too little or too much.
The worst that can happen is that folks have to say no. And if for any reason, and if they do, okay, well, then we find the money to buy it, or we find a sponsor to do it. This campaign, for example, I wanted to launch in a big way. I wanted to do this public service announcement. I wanted things done really, in a way that people would say, wow. And in order to do that, we had to wait a little while. We had to wait for the right people to say, let me help you with that. And that help for this campaign came to us, well, first from our board of directors, but then from Bob Bolduc at Pride Stores. Bob is a big believer in the work that we're doing. And he's been a longtime supporter of Square One. And when I sat down and said to him what we were planning to do, good health and good nutrition is something that's very important to him. So he said, I love this. I love this idea, and how can I help? So he sponsored us in putting together, which is now, on its way to going viral. We launched about a week ago, and it's spreading all over the internet, and I'm getting lots of great feedback on it. So I'm pretty excited about it.
And that is the exciting part about that. I mean, when you talk about the internet and things going viral, we're going way beyond Springfield to people, probably all over the world who may have some history of being in Springfield or some history with Square One. And they need this kind of reminder that, hey, we need your help.
Absolutely. We have, because we've been around so long, Dave, that we get feedback all the time. I run into folks, at events and things like that. And they say, we were known to most way back when as Springfield Day Nursery. Yep. And I will get, people will show me pictures. Oh my gosh, look at this picture. They'll pull out of their wallet or they'll pull up on their phone. This was me when I was at Springfield Day Nursery, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And that's a lot of fun. There's a long history here. I had a great story. I brought someone into one of our centers, and of course, I'm so missing the days of being able to bring visitors in to have an experience with us and have a little chat with our preschoolers. I can always promise people it'll be the best part of your week, hands down. There's nothing better than getting a chance to either sit down and have lunch or chit chat with our kids. You just never know what they're going to say, but it's always a bright spot in the day. I had somebody come in, and we were walking the halls, and she was sort of reminiscing. She had gone there when she was a child, she and her brother. So we're talking, at that point, it was probably like 30 years prior. And she said, oh gosh, some of this stuff is coming back to me. I think I actually, I'm starting to remember some of this stuff. And we walked into one of the classrooms, and she heard the voice of one of the teachers, and she and I were talking, and she said, oh my gosh, I know that voice. And our teacher turned around and said, I know you. That, and they had this amazing reunion. I mean, I was like, the tears were flowing. They, you know, and they hadn't seen each other in over 30 years. And we have teachers who have been with us for 40 or 50 years. So it's not uncommon for people to say, oh my gosh, I remember my days at your King Street site, and my teacher, Tommy Johnson, is like an institution in Springfield and has impacted the lives of thousands upon thousands of kids here, that we always hear from people all the time. How's Tommy? And she retired from us a few years ago, but you know, we're still in very close touch. And people have those kinds of memories with us. And some folks will want to send their children to us because there's a generational history there, that their parents or their grandparents and, you know, came to us as kids. It's pretty amazing.
You know, I stop and think too, the challenges you faced over the last 10 years, and I'll go back to the June 1st tornado,
Yes.
and then the explosion over on Worthington Street, and now COVID-19. That's more than, you look at that and go, that's more than any nonprofit should have to deal with at any time over the, you know, whether 120 years and you've done that in 10 years and have survived.
Resiliency. That's our big you know, our big cause word is that we're resilient. And jokingly, you know, our president and CEO Joan Kagan, who just recently announced her retirement, she used to joke that, you know, first the tornado, then, you know, a few months later was the gas explosion. She said she'd walk into meetings and nobody wanted to sit next to her. You know, it was like, you're bad luck. But you're right, Dave. We lost a site in the tornado. We lost a site in with the gas explosion. And unfortunately, the way that our funding structures work, we couldn't just rebuild, and we've had to shrink some of that work or get creative and figure out other ways to continue to serve families who needed us. You know, our funding for families who qualify, so if they're financially eligible for assistance from the state, the way that works is we're reimbursed by the child by the day. So when children come to us, we have to submit all of our attendance reports, and we get reimbursed by the child by the day. So the downside of that is that if we have a slot to fill, if a child has left us and we are working on filling that slot, we're not being paid for that slot. The other thing is if a child is absent beyond the number of allowable absences, we don't get paid for that slot either. So as I explained, some of our families are really challenged, and they may pick up and leave, and we don't always know what their circumstances are. It's, you know, it's a challenge. We just don't always know. So we lose a lot of money that way. And the deficit between what it actually costs us to provide care for a typical preschooler, for example, the amount of money that it costs us versus what we're reimbursed from the state leaves a deficit of about $6,000 per child per year. That's a lot of weight for fundraising, but we're lucky we get it done. But with certain things coming up and unexpected circumstances, nobody in the world expected COVID-19 to strike, right? So again, we have to pivot and be able to respond that way and say, okay, well, we have to do this. How are we going to pay for it? Who's going to help us with this? Where are we going to draw some of these funds from?
I know resiliency, one of Mayor Sarno's favorite words.
Yeah.
Can we talk about Joan for a minute? You know, I've known Joan since her days at Brightside. I want to say back to 1984. She has been a remarkable leader for you folks, hasn't she?
She absolutely has. Joan is, you know, she's, for anybody who knows Joan knows she's this very petite, you know, but you don't let her size fool you. That woman is, she is a very strong, powerful leader in this community, and has really, her career has impacted so much better for children and families throughout Western Massachusetts. You know, I keep saying she's got these tiny little feet, but she is leaving some giant shoes to fill in her position here.
She's a great lady, and I know she will be missed. But she's helped make. Let's put square one on very square and solid footing over the last few years.
Absolutely. So I mentioned before, a lot of the you know, Springfield area veterans here will always remember, that we were Springfield Day Nursery. Joan was, when she came on board here, I think, probably 17, 18 years ago now, took a look at the work we were doing and said, well, it's great that we're doing all of this work with the children, but what about their families? And that was sort of what I spoke about before, that we know that in order for our children to be successful, we really need that strategic point of intervention. And that's with the parents, the grandparents, the foster parents, whomever is responsible for the care of that child. That was all Joan. Joan built that part of the agency from the ground up. Hired one social worker, that now we have a team of about 40 social workers, expanded all of that, grew and developed and grew all of our home visiting programs, all of the services that we provide in that side of the organization was 100% Joan Kagan's vision. And I know personally, Joan has been a great leader to me even before I came on board here to the agency. Everyone looked to her as the expert and the leader when it came to child welfare and early childhood education.
Indeed. Anything we haven't touched on that you'd like to mention?
I don't think so. I really urge people to visit our website, startatsquareone.org, and take a look at that public service video. I promise it will make you smile, if nothing else. Hopefully it makes you want to give too, but it really is it was very creative. We worked with a great team to help us produce it. Our friends over at Chick Media and New York Sound in Motion. It is so awesome to have such creative support from such awesome, well-established organizations here who all come forward and say, what can I do to help? How do I support you in this? So we're really grateful for that. But I really urge folks to take a look at it. Again, hopefully it makes you want to make a donation, small, large, anywhere in between. But it'll definitely brighten your day, if nothing else.
My thanks to Kristine Allard for taking time out of her busy schedule to be my guest on this week's edition of the Even Better Western Mass podcast. To learn more about Square One, you can visit their website, startatsquareone.org. Thanks for watching or listening to this week's edition of the Even Better Western Mass podcast. Stay safe, stay well, and if you can, join me next week.